When it's time to cut your fabric, you want to make sure that you're working with straight, even lines and flat fabric. So first off, make sure that your fabric is ironed and flat. And then you also want to make sure that your edges are even. You'll notice we still have a selvage here. We don't want the selvage in our project. So we are going to go ahead and trim that off. There we go. Or when you're cutting, move your hand as you cut along the ruler to keep it nice and solid so that it doesn't move. All right, so now we have a nice clean edge on this side. So let's slide our fabric over so that it is now even with this line right here on the very edge. So we can now use that as a reference to clean up or true up our bottom edge right here. So let's go ahead and make sure that everything is nice and flush. All right, so we can use this. All right, you see this one line? I'm going to use it on the edge of the mat to line up on the edge of the mat. Make sure it's nice and even. And I'm going to use that as my guide to create a nice straight edge that is perpendicular or 45 degrees from this one, which will give me a perfect corner to work from. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and trim that. So now I can go ahead and slide down into that corner, and you can see how my edge of my fabric lines up on this edge and on this edge, and it's nice and straight. Now, one of the neat things that we can also use are different size rulers, such as these squares right here, these quilting squares. So for instance, if I wanted to measure out a 5 by 5 like this one is, or if I wanted to measure out a 10.5 by 10.5 square, these are all set. So all I need to do is make sure that they are trued up with the edges of my fabric, and then just mark out the edges. So in that case, if I wanted to make this one 5 by 5, mark it out and cut out that piece. So let's say if I want to do a square that is 4 inches by 3 inches, I can use this as well, okay? So let's find where the 3 meets the 4. Put that on the corner of my fabric, just like that. So you see this side, my vertical is going up along that line right there. It's 4 inches out, and this line is following the 3. So you've got 3 inches up. So it makes it 4 by 3. I can mark my fabric and cut it out. Sometimes we can get really lucky and have a fabric that already has a very symmetrical pattern in it. So use these to your advantage. Number one, if you don't, it's going to make it very obvious on your finished product and that your pattern is completely off. So by using these as your guidelines, it'll make it a lot easier to make sure that your fabric and your project looks nice at the end, but also it makes your measuring so much easier. As you can see, I can just follow that line and that line, and I can use these to help with measuring. For this project, I'm making a zip top purse. These are the exterior pieces. I now need to cut out the lining. This project is 9.5 by 8.5. I don't have to worry about seam allowances because that is the exact measurements of this, so I can cut an exact mirror of these. Now, one of the ways that you can speed up cutting is by cutting 2 pieces at one time. So what I'm going to do is fold this over so that it's doubled. So it's a double layer. I'm making sure that I'm not wasting any material So I've just taken a quick look and noticed that I have a little over 8.5 inches here. So to make sure that I have a nice even edge here at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and line up my fabric. Actually, I'm going to true up this one side. So I can use, because I know a fold is a nice straight edge, I can use it as my guide. And I can go ahead and true up this side. Also have a little bit of a nick there, you'll see, so I don't want that on my final project. And then down here, I'm going to cut off this fold because I don't need the fold. Some projects are going to tell you to cut on the fold, and that's because when you open it out, you'll have the full piece of the size of fabric that you need. In this case, I don't need the fold, so I'm going to go ahead and use my edge of my fabric as my straight edge to make sure it's true. And that gives me this edge, and I know it's fine. Just cut that little sliver off there. Here we go. All right, so it's been freed. All right, so we needed 9.5 by 8.5. So I'm going to measure up 8.5. So let's see here. We've got 8.5 by 9.5. If I'm feeling confident, I can go ahead and cut this out, but just to make sure, I can also mark my fabric just as that extra layer to make sure that I am making an accurate cut. Now remember, be very careful that the fabric underneath does not shift. So if I lift this up, I lift it up, I don't slide it. I'm very careful, but you can now see that I have marked out, and that's going to give me a nice, perfect, clean cut through 2 pieces of fabric and make sure that they are both exactly the same size. Again, every time we make sure our measurements and our cuts are exactly the same, helps us to put all the pieces together perfectly as we go throughout our project.